What are we looking for when we ask the question, what is the meaning of life? Let's consider.
I can't get it off my mind.
Hello, philosophers. I'm Chico. Welcome to the Philosopher Show, where we consider the greatest questions of human history. Let's say I hear about woozles. I propose we go hunting for woozles. You say, awesome, what's a woozle like? I say, I don't know. That's why I want to go hunt for one. The problem is, even if we find a woozle, how will we know that that's what we were looking for in the first place if we have no idea what a woozle is? So we'll need some kind of criteria. Maybe something like woozles leave tracks, sometimes woozles hang out with whizzles. In the same way, when I'm hunting for the meaning of life, we'll need to start with some kind of criteria so that we'll be able to recognize it when we find it. First, let's look at the word life. The word life seems obvious, but there are those who have doubted whether there is such a thing. For example, there was a Scientific American article that I remember reading where the author questioned whether we actually have such a thing as life. The reasons aren't really important. Let's just put it this way. If I were to hold a gun to your head and say, don't worry, there's no such thing as life, so I'm not going to be killing you, would you be persuaded? Whatever it is that you're so worried about losing, if I were to pull that trigger, we'll call that life. And that brings me to another point. When we ask this question about life, we mean human life. I'm interested in what does life mean as a human? Now, maybe the answer includes all life or just my life specifically, but either way, the question seems to be about life as a human. Really, the big question is, what about that word meaning? What's odd is that it seems like this word meaning is more at home when we're talking about words. And clearly, it's not the case that we're using the word meaning in a univocal sense here. Univocal meaning exactly the same thing. And here's why. When I ask the question, what is the meaning of life versus what is the meaning of life? I'm asking two different questions. In the first one, I'm asking you to define a term, and you might say something like a thing that grows, takes in nutrition, etc., etc. In the second one, I'm asking something about significance. In the first one, I'm just mentioning the word life. In the second one, I'm using the word life. So it can't be that the word meaning is being used here univocally. We have the exact same words, so one of them is going to have to mean something a little bit different. But I doubt it's being used equivocally as well. Equivocally meaning totally different meanings. These two words seem to be enmeshed in some way. I mean, it's not like the Board of Education versus I stepped on a board. You see those two words used, they clearly are being used in two totally different ways. It's not so clear that the word meaning is being used in two different ways here. So if it's not being used univocally or equivocally, then it must be being used analogically or similarly. So our question would be similar in what ways? And we can look at the question like this. Imagine all the possible splotches of ink that you could have on a piece of paper, right? All the different possible combinations, all the different possible combinations of sounds that you could have. What's really weird is that words are just some combinations of splotches of ink or some combinations of sounds. What is it that gives words meaning when the rest of those configurations are totally meaningless? What's the difference between the two? Now, whatever it is that gives those specific configurations meaning, when none of the other ones have meaning, the way in which it does so might be similar to the way in which our lives get meaning from wherever they get it. Well, one thing is that the words are usable for some kind of purpose, specifically communication. Now, I don't think that our lives can be used for the purpose of communication, but it is plausible that purpose is one of the things that we're looking for. After all, it seems like the meaning of life question is tied up with other questions like, what's the point? Why am I here? So one criterion I think we're looking for is purpose. Now, the meaning of a word is tied to its specific purpose, communication. This means that words can be used for that purpose, but it also means that words can fail to achieve that purpose. They can be used poorly. They can be used more or less correctly, better or worse. In the same way, I think it's plausible that our search for meaningfulness in life means that we're looking for some kind of direction. How should we live? What constitutes a good life? In other words, there's an axiological aspect to it. There's a valuation. Meaning of life is tied to the value of life. So there's criteria number 2. Finally, let's say you're walking by a wall and the wind blows paint across that wall in the form of what we would consider words writing out, beware of dog. Absurd, of course. But if you saw that happen, would you take those to be meaningful words? Unless you knew someone was somehow controlling the wind to do just that, you would think that that was meaningless. So word meaning comes from somewhere. Where exactly it comes from, that's hotly debated in the philosophy of language, likely from a speaking community though. In the case of our lives, it seems obvious that their meaning doesn't come from some kind of speaking community. So instead, we will want to know, what is it that endues them with meaning? What is the source of meaning in our lives? So there's criteria number 3. There may be more criteria that we should look for, but so far from what I've got is that a good answer to the question, what is the meaning of life, should answer what is the purpose of life, should explain how it gives life its value, and should explain the source of the purpose. If you could think of more criteria, please let me know in the comments, and please stay tuned to this playlist. Obviously a super important question because it's one that we've asked from the dawn of time. That's all I got for today. Adios.